Hey there, and welcome back to another Dragon Prince video. And today I want to talk about a debate amongst the fandom that seems to be a bit difficult to settle from where we are in the progression of the show. And specifically, the role of dark magic, both in the current confines of the story being told, as well as its role in the future of the overarching narrative. So from what we've seen so far, dark magic, right from the get-go, gets a really bad rap. When we're first introduced to it, we're briefly led to believe it's this awesome and wonderful thing, just like Callum believes, until we actually see characters like Claudia and Viren use it and realise that maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be. We see them sacrifice the lives of various different creatures in order to fuel their dark rituals, and the casting of the spells themselves also seems pretty bleak. The spells themselves are usually dark purpley colours most of the time, which by now is firmly set up as the evil magic colour as far back as early Disney films like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. We see cute little animals die right before our eyes to fuel the spells. The user's features often get weirdly distorted so that they resemble a corpse that's been thrown into a river, and their voices go all freaky and they speak backwards, like they've been possessed by a demon. So yeah, just from all of that alone, we're positioned early on to think that this magic is not something that should be used at all. That it's evil, and it ticks all our horror movie boxes of being possessed by the Antichrist. It's just presented as so unsettling and wrong, something that goes against the natural order of things. And then even just calling it dark magic. Yeah, there's not really any wriggle room for you as the audience to try and justify it. It's clear that you, as the audience, are supposed to think that this stuff's gnarly. They aren't even trying to hide it with a name like that. But even beyond that, the narrative pretty much frames everything that's gone wrong as being the fault of dark magic. A desire to bring prosperity to the kingdom led the forces of King Harrow infiltrating Xadia to harvest magical materials for dark magic, which then of course leads to the retaliation by the Dragon King and the death of the Queen. And this in turn leads to the murder of the Dragon King by Harrow and Viren in retaliation, and the stealing of Zim's egg, which in turn leads the Dragon Queen to order a hit on Harrow and his kids, and then cue the events of the show. And all of this can be traced back to this dark magic use. But even beyond that bleak introduction to the concept of dark magic, we continue to see, time and time again, that this stuff is just bad news. I mean, when we're first introduced to Viren, we see that whilst he's a bit pompous and rude, he seems to be an okay enough person. And we learn that at one point of the past, he was just some regular nice dad, until his son got sick and he used copious amounts of dark magic to heal his son, in the process permanently deforming himself and scaring off his wife for good. And this on page looks terrible. A mother that doesn't care to save her own son? And after all, the initial reason for using the dark magic to save his own child? What could be more sympathetic than that? But of course, as we know, this leads both Viren and Claudia into a false sense of security and down a darker path. Because as he becomes the court wizard for Harrow, he slips further and further and wants to push more and more. And this seems to make him more and more hungry for power. First leading him to manipulate Harrow into slaying the Dragon King to enrich the kingdom, and then pushing him to probably betray Harrow once he was no longer useful. And then at this point he meets Erebos and falls deeper into the pit of dark magic use, which causes him to claim power by overthrowing Ezran and assassinating the other kings, before he begins a genocidal march to bring war to the elves and slay the Dragon Prince once and for all. Oh, and harvest his soul and his life force for further dark magic. And then this is further being mirrored by the character arc of Claudia. And when we first see her, she's presented as the very early love interest of Prince Callum. But then as soon as she starts to use dark magic, that role begins to shift, as she, much like her father, slips further and further into the grip of instability, beginning with restoring her brother's ability to walk, before she manages to full on bring her father back to life after he fell off a mountain. And all of this at the cost of turning her hair white, and most likely sacrificing somebody else. So yeah, from all of this, it would be pretty easy to conclude that you just shouldn't use dark magic at all, that it's just bad news. And yet despite this, there are large subsections of the community that think this is not in fact the case, that it's not evil, that it's not bad, it's just the way in which it's used that determines whether it's good or bad. And I can't quite wrap my head around that. From what I understand, they say that dark magic is only bad when it's used for bad things. And they use proof of it building up these glorious civilizations, that it's able to restore the dead to life or heal crippling injuries. Basically, if you can think it, you can achieve it. But I kind of think that this sort of talk misses the point of it entirely. I mean, yes, it built up that early human city, but it also sealed its doom as it attracts the attention of the Dragon King. And I mean, if the magic wasn't bad, why would he attack? He knows what's up. Plus, it seems to me that it has a corrupting effect, like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. Because let's take a look at the main practitioners of this sort of magic. Viren, Claudia, Erebos. And we'll start with Viren. Now, as I stated before, Viren has pretty much gone full Golem by this point. We know that the reason he started down this path was to heal Soren from a life-threatening illness. So it starts off all happy. He did it for his family. And then his wife leaves him because he's what? Scary? Now, I don't know about you, but I don't find Viren to be a very reliable source of information. So I reckon she left because he was a whole lot more than just scary. And then we see him convince the king that they should use it for the betterment of the realm, except it leads to the death of the queen. And then he convinces the king that it's a good idea to seek revenge on the Dragon King using dark magic, with the key ingredient being Queen Sarai's last breath. Because, you know, that's the type of thinking that anyone would have when watching your best friend's wife die. Ooh, better get her last breath for some dark magic later. So they do this, even though that they were totally in the wrong in the first place. And then this results in the assassination attempt we see in Season 1, which in turn leads Viren down an even darker magical path with Erebos' guidance, which in turn leads to him trying to murder children, assassinate other kings, and wage a crusade against the elves and dragons. But maybe he's just the aberration. And nope, because Claudia is going down a similar path. The more she uses dark magic, the further away from Soren she feels. He would pull away from her darkness, and in turn, she would become more determined to keep her family together and uses darker and darker magic, which affects her stability until we get to the resurrection of Viren. And I guarantee his resurrection, that spell, is going to have a big effect on both of their mental states. And I mean, to bring back a person, what does she have to sacrifice? One of the soldiers? A person? Jesus. Even just the character parallels between her and her brother kind of imply this. In the very beginning, Soren's kind of made out to be a bit of an asshole, bullying Callum and being an overall meathead kind of guy. Meanwhile, comparatively, Claudia was meant to be more lighthearted and kind, and yet she's the one drawn to dark magic, unlike Soren. It's a gradual character flip, and if dark magic can do this to somebody that was viewed as a good person, who should have strong morals, and want to use dark magic for the betterment of the realm, how could she be corrupted? Unless it is a corrupting influence. It just feels like a prime example that dark magic, regardless of how good your intentions are, is a corrupting and evil thing always. And then there's Erebos, and I don't really think I need to go too much into why he is the living, breathing representation of why dark magic's bad. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't this dude basically the pioneer of dark magic use? Theoretically, elves can already learn magic, as they're in touch with the various different arcanums. So what the hell does an elf need to create a separate dark force of magic for? One that sacrifices life? And I mean, if this guy, the founder of this school of magic, has gone full Sith Lord, surely it indicates that in the end, whilst the magic may seem good and useful at first, it's a corrupting thing that always turns things rotten. Now, we know that politics were at play for a lot of this, and that humans were perceived as lesser by other magical beings, and this is the reason that dark magic was first utilized by them anyway. It's sympathetic, I'll agree, but it's like using fossil fuel. Sure, it was a good first step into advancing civilization and progressing our lives for the better, but we've progressed and learnt more and have other opportunities to solve and create things in a better way, e.g. green energy. It mirrors the show kind of perfectly. To me, justifying dark magic and saying it could be used for good is such a weird stance to have. It's like arguing that fossil fuels, instead of investing in green energy, is the way to go. Because whilst fossil fuels has let us develop great civilizations, the world's starting to rot because of it now. Dark magic pretty much feels like a stand-in for burning coal. Yeah, it gets results, but the cleaner magic is probably better for you in the end, and for the world. But in the end, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What's your stance on the dark magic debate? Good, bad, somewhere in between? I'm curious for more thoughts, so make sure to leave a comment and let me know.